Let's bring in Chris Stigall.
He is Chris Stigall.
Chris Stigall.
I'm joined now by Chris Stigall,
host of the Chris Stigall Show.
So let's bring in talk radio host Chris Stigall.
Also, his podcast is a must-listen every day. Chris Stigall Show podcast.
And host of the Chris Stigall Show.
Let's bring in Chris Stigall.
Please welcome Chris Stigall.
The Chris Stigall podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
Hey there, thanks a lot for downloading the Chris Stigall Show podcast. Glad to have you along today. Thanks a lot for giving this a 5-star review and a written review at Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you get an opportunity to do it, it's always helpful to the operation here. We're grateful that you do that and let other people know about the podcast. You have helped this thing grow by leaps and bounds with your support over the years. We're so thankful. And we also can't do it without your support of our sponsors. And the fact that we have great sponsors in the podcast means everything to the operation. So if you enjoy listening to the podcast, if you don't mind rating it, and if you don't mind supporting great sponsors like our title sponsor, John Ruhlman. John has been with us now for a few years, and he is absolutely the best when you're looking for the best prices and the best coverage in health insurance. usmedicalplan.com is his website. Now, all you need to do is set aside, let's call it a half an hour. Reach out, usmedicalplan.com, or call 877-410-4321 and tell them what you're paying right now and what you think about your coverage right now. Or maybe you have some questions. You're just not really happy with your current health insurance situation. They'll talk you through your options. And here's the thing. At U.S. Medical Plan, they know 100 different private health insurance companies. So they're going to get you the best possible price and never going to skimp on coverage. I know a lot of people think, well, if it's cheaper, it's not going to be as good a coverage. Not true. In fact, what you'll find when you work with U.S. Medical Plan is oftentimes you're paying more. You're paying much more than you should be for health insurance for not as great a coverage. 877-410-4321 or usmedicalplan.com. Oh, you're totally, absolutely authentic. No doubt about it. This lady, this Harriet Hageman that replaced Liz Cheney out there in Wyoming, she had a town hall yesterday. CNN is very excited that Harriet got peppered with questions from people demanding to know where the fraud is. Totally legitimate, everybody. Yes, those town halls are completely organic because that's what Americans are standing up and shouting in unison. I know you're hearing it where you live, too. Where's this fraud Elon Musk is claiming to uncover? Isn't that, Fast Eddie, isn't that what everybody's demanding? That the fraud isn't real? They want proof that the government is wasting our money? Haven't you heard that outcry from everybody?
Yes, they need good, solid proof, Chris. Yes.
Proof. No one believes. You need proof like you need proof of Bigfoot that the government is wasting money, right? You need to see it with your own eyes. You don't believe it otherwise.
Of course not. No. Please.
This is so stupid. Folks, this is so dumb. I know you know it's dumb, but I want to keep reminding you that none of this is real. People at these Republican town halls in Wyoming shouting at the Republican Congresswoman, where's Elon Musk's fraud? That's your job to find, not his. They're the same people that are blowing up and burning Teslas and Tesla dealerships. It's all organized. Do you really think there are people on a Thursday night in Wyoming going to a Republican Congresswoman's town hall and berating her about waste in government? Do you really think that's organic? Of course it's not. In fact, I just saw a clip before the show started. It looked like a guy was nodding off behind her. One of the extras that Act Blue or whoever funded the whole town hall thing. They paid him like $50 to go in there and just sit with a sign. Some purple-headed weirdo lady in there screaming as though she was one of her constituents. So phony. All of it's phony. Dangerous. Highly organized. But phony. Glad to be with you. Glad to be back. Away for a couple of days. I am grateful to Bob Friends who sat in this chair on the Salem News Channel anyway. We had a couple of great podcasts for you if you were away. People that don't always check the podcast, you should, because I had brand new content there you didn't get to hear. So check that out, too. We always try to leave you with something on the podcast if, in fact, we're not here in the chair on the Salem News Channel and the Salem Radio Network, coast to coast. Grateful that you're here today. It also happens to be Open Line Friday, which means we have a lot to catch up on. I naturally, I get on a plane and all hell breaks loose because that's always the way it works. It was just a given. Judges start going crazy. Trump dismantles the Department of Education. It was bound to happen, Ed. It doesn't matter. If I'm going to be gone, we said it before I left, huge stuff's going to happen, and that's okay. I know Bob handled it beautifully, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely, Chris. But no nukes. No nukes were launched. That's good, right?
Well, political nukes were launched. This Department of Education dismantling. How likely is it, do you think, that it's going to make it through Congress? Because as annoying as it is, ultimately it is going to have to make its way through both chambers. You're going to have to find 60 votes in the Senate to get that done. You think you can get 7 Democrats to come over and eliminate the Department of Education? I'm not sure you can get every Republican in the Senate to eliminate the Department of Education, truth be told. You optimistic?
Oh, no, Chris, no, I don't think they're going to get that done. Of course not. I have no faith in the Congress or the Senate.
I don't either. Not when it counts on big things like this, because teachers' unions still have a tremendous amount of power. There is nothing. Let me tell you something. For whether you're a state-level politician, a local politician, a federal politician, can I tell you, and I've seen it with my own eyes, there is nothing that frightens them more than someone that calls themselves teacher, principal, superintendent. Those titles carry with them, for people who are political, utter terror. Chills run down their spine. Because, you see, you are not to say, and even Trump, I understand the needle that they have to thread here. And again, I always have to preface by saying, I have friends who are public school teachers. My mother was a public school teacher for 30 years. I met my wife studying, training, practicing, whatever you want to call it, to become a public school teacher. She then became a public school teacher for 10 years. So I always have to say this, much like I said it about federal job cuts. I do not hate public school teachers. I think there are a lot of wonderful public school teachers. I do not think everybody that goes into public education wants to run an indoctrination factory. However, I do believe that is what the majority of public education has become. I do not think it is deniable in any shape, matter, or form that public education is not working. It's not a metric that we can measure as working in this country any longer. We have spent billions and billions, $1 trillion since the 70s, and test scores have plummeted. We are not competitive on any front. Trump was talking about this yesterday, as a matter of fact. Let's just go to some of it as he makes these announcements. Let's start with 11/24. This was what he was talking about yesterday in terms of results.
After 45 years, the United States spends more money on education by far than any other country, and spends likewise by far more money per pupil than any country, and it's not even close. But yet we rank near the bottom of the list in terms of success. It's an amazing stat. Those are two stats you don't want. The most money spent per pupil, and you're at the bottom of the list. And that's where we are, like it or not. And we've been there for a long time. 70% of 8th graders are not proficient in either reading or in math. 70%. 40% of 4th graders lack even basic reading skills, can't read. Students in our public elementary and middle schools score worse in reading today than when the department opened, by a lot. In Baltimore, 40% of the high schools have 0 students who can do basic mathematics. Not even the very simplest of mathematics. I said, give me your definition of basic. And they're talking about like adding a few numbers together. Despite these breathtaking failures, the department's discretionary budget has exploded by 600% in a very short period of time, and it employs bureaucrats in buildings all over Washington, D.C. And as a former real estate person, I will tell you, I ride through the streets of Washington and it says Department of Education, Department of Education. I said, how do you fill those buildings? It's crazy what's happened over the years.
Yes, good. Ed, I feel like I wrote that speech for him yesterday. I could have written that speech that he just gave. I don't know how many shows I've done over how many years where I said those very, very words, as a matter of fact.
And I'm curious, what is the objection to that? What is the, like, I would love to hear the best leftist out there, the smartest, most articulate, like maybe like a Ben Shapiro on the left. Please explain to me anything wrong with what he just said.
And of course they can't. The Department of Education stood idle as math scores fell 13%, drug use surged 20% post-COVID, teen suicides climbed 30% after lockdowns, kids didn't learn, they regressed. They've been abandoned by a system bent on control. That's it. It was a disgrace, and it was on purpose. Post-COVID, this thing, it came to a head like acne. It was the ugliest thing you've ever seen. The education department, if that's what you want to call it federally, the results going on the local level all across the country, save a few. I know there's some outposts that are doing great work. I can't speak with a broad brush, but by and large, we all understand public education is not doing the job. And it was brought to bear during COVID. We all saw it with our own eyes. And Trump now is saving kids from this destructive indoctrination machine. The department receives an F grade, period. 45 years, they get an F. And Trump is now gutting it. First president with the courage to actually stare this down and do something about it. He's honoring his word, and he's delivering what he pledged. He promised this to the American people, and he's doing it. It's a common sense fix, and parents know it's right. He's not saying cutting funding off even, by the way. He's not saying that we're not going to continue to spend the money on education. He's saying we're dismantling this federal bureaucracy, blocks and blocks and blocks of buildings, paying people, doing who knows what. We're going to take all that money and we're going to send it back to the states to spend it on the kids. Who could possibly object to that is exactly right, Eddie. Trump's order cripples a system that has dulled our kids' minds. But to fully close the department, of course, is up to Congress. Can they do it? I don't know. But if they manage to achieve this, or even that Trump has achieved this, I believe, as well as perhaps meaningful cuts on taxes, getting rid of taxes on Social Security, overtime, tips, this is the stuff. Now you're cooking with gas. Now you're talking. Now you're talking about where people live. Now you're talking about real work done at the federal level to impact the average man and woman, the true middle class, people trying to educate their kids and save a couple of bucks in their pocket. The Republicans are on the precipice of doing something transformational. So important, Democrats may never win another election again if they can get their excrement together this year and get it done. Trump is showing the way. This is, in my opinion, to save this country, what happened yesterday, this is how you save the country. If you don't give education back to the states and back to families and give families true educational freedom of choice and make educators compete for dollars, if you don't do that, we'll lose the country. You can't have these indoctrination factories and maintain the country. We've been raising generations of little Marxists who hate the country. That's got to change. Trump took a huge step yesterday. We must follow. Good to see you. No, it's going to be a fight. To the bitter end, it's going to be a fight. You can bet your bottom dollar the Democrats know that their time is up. This USAID business, the federal judges fighting to reinstate that. The federal judges fighting to reinstate all of these jobs that Trump has been slashing. There will be a fight over this Department of Education executive order. The reason there will be a fight over it is because this is the Democrats' power center. As you understand, there is no Democrat Party. What Donald Trump is doing, and this goes back to something that I know he didn't really want to admit to, and I don't mean to suggest he was not telling the truth, but I will tell you that I believe that this blueprint is exactly what Project 2025 was. You remember all that ballyhoo? Wait, Project 2025, Project 2025. And they were so loud about it and screaming about it and hysterical about it. And I kept saying, what is this? What are they talking about? And so I looked into it. And I did a few shows on it before you and I were together. Incidentally, it's also Open Line Friday if you want to come in at 855-STIGAL, 855-784-4255. So I looked into it, and what it is, what it was, and why the left was so concerned about it was several dozen, I guess, members of different think tanks. Heritage Foundation was kind of taking the lead on it. It was lots of different conservative or libertarian think tanks that got together in a room and effectively said, if we should manage to run the tables in November 2024, what could we do? Let's really think big here and imagine. What could we do? We collectively, as a group, let's all come together, put our ideas in a hopper, and talk. And what this group collectively came up with was Republicans have always won elections and been very short-sighted. They do little nips and little tucks. They get a tax cut here. They pass a little thing. It's all kind of formulaic. It's a little win here. Then they spend the rest of their time spinning their wheels on mainstream media, fighting with Democrats, getting distracted, not accomplishing much. What do Democrats do when they win? Democrats, when they take control, they own it, and they run the tables, and they take to the courts, and they use the judiciary. They do whatever they got to do, and if they want you to so much as take medicine, they will force you to take a shot or cost you your job if you don't obey. They open the southern border. They change election law, because Democrats are always thinking, we've got this window of time for power. In order to codify this thing and make sure we don't lose our grip, we're going to have to rearrange the deck chairs. We're going to have to reimagine this whole thing. We're going to have to infuse a bunch of wacko, activist, left-wing, claptrap Marxism garbage into every department. We're going to have to start funneling money to organizations to do our bidding. I mean, they are creative and disruptive on a scale Republicans can't even understand. It's mind-boggling to normal, sane people who don't look at the government as a weapon. But you see, Democrats look at the government as a blunt force instrument over the people. They can't win the people over by telling the truth about what they believe. They lie about what they believe until they win an election, and then they use the government as a weapon of mass cultural destruction on all of us. And so for the first time, a group of people got together as Republicans and libertarians and conservatives, or whatever you want to call all of these people, and it was a ton of different people, not just the Heritage Foundation, and they all sat together and they said, what do we do if we should take back Congress and win the presidency? And they said, we need to start to reimagine truly draining the swamp. What does it mean to reimagine this government in our eyes? And the left caught wind of it. They were tipped off, and that's why they started shrieking, Project 2025 is coming. They knew. They were correct, the left was, to be panicked last fall, because if what would happen that ended up happening were to occur, they knew their time was up and the train was going to leave the station, and that's what we're watching. I don't know that I necessarily would call it Project 2025 by architectural plans per se, but that is the thrust of it. With Elon Musk, they came in, they took technology, AI, they applied it to all these big bloated bureaucracies, and one at a time, they started to surgically strike. We're spending billions over here. We're spending billions over there. We've got thousands of employees doing what over there? We've got all these buildings open over. What is this? What is this? What is this? They're pointing it out. Bing, bing, bing. Real time. Closing, hacking, cutting, shutting down, shutting off funding. And what have Democrats left? Only one option. Activist judges to try to stop it. And that's what they've chosen to do. Obama over the years and Biden after that, they have placed enough left-wing ideologue judges to try to stop and hang on to the last vestiges of weaponized government that they can keep together, because they know this is it. This is ball game if Trump and Republicans are successful. Checking our food for the poor tally. Oh, I had no doubt this was going to work out just fine. This is going to be a perfect way to wrap up. You ready? I was just checking the donation totals. You know, our goal was $40,000. When I met with the Food for the Poor people, they said, Chris, we know you're a new program to the network, and you're meeting a lot of your audience for the first time here in these first couple of months. So we're going to ask if you don't mind helping us. And Salem, our parent organization, has worked with Food for the Poor for years and years, and they said, if you don't mind, we'd love to set a goal and just see if we can reach a $40,000 goal. I said, you know what? I love what you do. It would be my pleasure to try to be helpful to the best of my ability. Let's see what the audience thinks. This audience stepped up and in week number 1 of this campaign raised $40,000 without blinking. And I have thanked God sincerely for your generosity that you did this. And in doing this, you, frankly, you made your host look good. Not that that's what it's about, but you did, because they said, wow, Stigall, you've got quite an audience. I said, but of course I do. There was never a doubt in my mind. But in all sincerity, you are incredibly generous and kind, and you've got enormous hearts, and you've got an enormous heart for just the right charity. I can tell you that. The Food for the Poor people, are so thankful for your record-setting pace of support for them. We have nearly doubled that. And you know what I'd like to do today is achieve that final double mark. So we're at $77,367 with a week to go in this campaign. I'd like to get to 80 today. Ed, I don't think that's tough. Do you think that's tough today? I mean, given the clip this audience has already stepped up, $77,300. So we're less than, what? I'm not great with math, but we're well, I mean, it's just a little over $2,000. And I think in terms of this vast national audience that we have, I think we're going to be able to come up with $2,000 by the end of the show today. Don't you?
I do, Chris. I have faith, and I have faith in the audience, and I, of course, have faith in the Lord. So, yes, I think we're going to do it.
Jeff in Springboro gave. In Moore Park, Helen gave. Richard in Antelope gave. Huntington Valley, Joel gave. Peggy in Sarasota. The donations poured in even while Bob was here for a couple of days. So thankful to you for that. So thank you. And Food for the Poor thanks you. We're going to hit $80,000 today with your donations. And I hope if you're inclined, whatever it is you want to give, $10, $5, I don't care. A couple of easy ways to do it. Head to chrisstigall.com. There's a Feed Their Future banner right there at the top of the page. Click on it and give what you can today. Throughout Latin America, especially El Salvador, where Food for the Poor is working, food prices like they are here are skyrocketing, but they do not enjoy the economy. Even though ours is tough, they certainly don't have the economy we have. And there are a lot of kids, particularly kids under 5, that are facing real hunger. In fact, there's an anemia rate of 25% amongst kids 5 and under in El Salvador. It's tragic. But that's where Food for the Poor comes in. That's where your donations come in. Whatever you can give is going to make a difference this morning. And I believe we're going to hit it. I think we're going to hit 80,000. I think we're going to double what I was tasked with asking you to raise. And I'm certain you're going to come through to get this done today. We hit double, then it's all gravy. I mean, it's already all gravy. Double the goal is remarkable. Thank you. Support these kids, support the hundreds of farmers and food producers, and it strengthens, by the way, local food production. All of this is mission-based. There's no government bureaucracy involved in this at all at Food for the Poor. So however you reach out, you can text my name, Stigall, to 51555, and we'll send you a link to give. You can call this morning, 855-330-4673, 855-330-4673, and give that way, or again, Feed Their Future banner. I think we're going to crest double our goal this morning. And I'll let you know when we do. I'll keep checking the board as you give. If you want to leave your name and a note where you come from or why you're giving or for whom you're giving, I would love to share that here on the show today. Thank you, guys. You're just awesome, and that's all I can say about it. All right, back to what I was saying a minute ago about these judges. The only way Donald Trump can be thwarted and Republicans can be thwarted from truly draining the swamp and undoing the Democrat cabal, their power structure, the only way they can be stopped is through federal judges. And we've seen that on steroids this week. Mark Levin, who's brilliant, said it this way, cut 1108. It's just true. Take a listen.
Government exists for we the people. It doesn't exist for John Roberts, the judges, Congress, or anybody else. This whole thing was set up for us, to protect us. When these judges are conducting themselves this way, when they're interfering with an election, when they're grabbing, seizing power in front of our eyes, we're all smart, we see it, from the executive branch, a president of the United States. He's elected nationally. They're created by Congress. They're not even in the Constitution. They're using a power, judicial review, that's not even in the Constitution, that was created by the Supreme Court in 1803. They should at least have some level of deference to the President of the United States. And notice one other thing. Compare...
Yeah. And he goes on, and the only reason I cut that off, I mean, the great one is brilliant, and I don't mean to cut him off. I just wanted to share some more brilliance in the analysis of this over the last couple of days, and I regret that I couldn't be here with you. Although Tuesday I was already on this. I'm a judge. Judges, I said, in fact, I forgot, Ed, I said I was going to bring in a white powdered wig and a black robe and a gavel today, because when you do that, when you shout, I'm a judge, that means you're beyond reproach and you can do whatever the hell you please. You can shoplift. You can go steal a car. You can do whatever you want as long as you lead with, I'm a judge, by the way.
Forgot the black robe, too, man. Sorry.
Yeah. That's all right. We'll bring it in on Monday.
All right.
Michael Ryan wrote a piece at something called The Heartlander. John Roberts' reaction this week. Now, I happened to be traveling this week when our esteemed Chief Justice, who on Tuesday I was screaming, where the hell is he? Get off your asses and do something. What does he do? He admonishes Trump. He admonishes people for discussing the fact that these judges are entirely out of line trying to interfere in Donald Trump's national security policy. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I guess I could in one sense. This is also the same guy that told us that Obamacare could be legal. The government could force us to buy something if we called it a tax. John Roberts has been a snake for a very long time. And so it doesn't surprise me. I guess it shouldn't. But this one, even for him, was pretty amazing. He had no business whatsoever admonishing Trump or Congress or you and me or anybody else. He had no business weighing in on our impression of whether a judge should be impeached or not. None. It's not his place to opine. He has nothing to say about the impeachment of judges, including him. The Chief Justice's decision to make here is whether he's going to weigh in on reining in, slapping down, and restraining these little dictators in black robes at the federal level or not. Whether he's going to weigh in and say, hey, we have an executive branch, and you federal guys, you can't just step in and stop the executive branch from functioning. Not the way it works here. Or if he'd even stepped in and said, I think the federal judges are perfectly fine to step in and interrupt Trump. That would have been more acceptable than him admonishing us for having a discussion about whether they should be impeached or not. That's not for him to say. He has nothing to say about that. But then again, you understand. So Robert's reaction to Trump, says Michael Ryan here at the Heartlander, he rebukes the president as if there's anything at this point that Roberts can tell Trump about unjust impeachments. What a truly thoughtful Chief Justice would have done, he writes, when handed this dilemma, would be look down his own judiciary in the mirror, order the immediate review of every federal judge for both performance and conflict of interest issues. Indeed, Mr. Trump, having witnessed both problems personally, is the target of political lawfare last year, in which a judge and prosecutor, or two or three, were waist deep in their clear conflicts of interest. He might just have something to say about judicial error that the Chief Justice might learn from, writes Ryan. He went on to say, is the judiciary beyond reproach? The executive branch is currently doing some badly needed introspection and restructuring. Is the judiciary so superhuman that it requires no reforms ever? The rest of us certainly don't think so, and knowledgeable and keen observers across the nation are letting it be known that Justice Roberts is playing with fire and his own legacy and the future of the judiciary itself by not reining in the overreaching judges among his fold. Mike Davis, founder of the Article 3 Project, posted on X, an activist judge ordering planes to turn around during a national security operation is not a judicial decision. That is a highly illegal and extremely dangerous sabotage of the presidency, which is an impeachable offense. Sean Davis at The Federalist said Roberts does not appreciate how close to the ledge he is dancing right now. Once a president is forced by judicial insurrectionists to ignore their dictates and finally realize the only power they ever had was a common belief they were legitimate, it's over. And let me tell you, the fuel gauge on that legitimacy tank is starting to point to E, due to the ongoing insanity of unelected tyrants in robes. Once that tank is dry, it's over, because no president or Congress would ever again have any reason to defer to the whims of a cabal viewed as lawless and illegitimate by the people of this country. And then there's Newt. Michael Ryan highlighting Newt Gingrich signing off on this as well. If Chief Justice Roberts wants to minimize attacks on an out-of-control appointed left-wing district court judge abusing his role and claiming to be able to overrule the elected president of the United States on management details that are clearly within his role as defined by the Constitution and the Federalist Papers, then he should intervene and overrule these absurd power grabs. The Chief Justice can defend the court by overruling bad judges before the executive and legislative branches start acting against them. The burden is on the Chief Justice, not the president's. If Roberts fails to rein these judges in and safeguard the credibility of the judiciary, Davis might be right, adds Michael Ryan, who wrote this piece. The Chief Justice will have to resign. He's destroying the federal judiciary's legitimacy. He quoted Sean Davis as saying, that's exactly right. John Roberts, instead of weighing in on a political matter, should have weighed in on whether or not this pipsqueak judge or any of these pipsqueak judges have any right to step in and stop the executive branch from doing their work. And, of course, the answer is they do not. And John Roberts should swiftly address that. But if you allow the executive and the judicial to have this public fight and you don't weigh in as the Chief Justice on that, but instead you weigh in on a political argument, you're going to force Donald Trump and Congress to just ignore the judicial, as Michael writes in this important piece. You're going to have a real crisis on your hands, Chief Justice Roberts, if you don't settle this score and focus on what really matters, not your stupid, cologne and cufflink cocktail party discussion about whether impeachment is a proper discussion to be having right now. Nobody asked you. It's not your job to tell us what a proper discussion is. Your job is to tell us what's the proper role of a guy in a black robe in trying to thwart the executive action of the president. That's your job. Do your damned job, John Roberts, you disgrace. This is the Stigall Show. Here we go. A federal judge has ordered the Federal Bureau of Prisons to return 2 transgender inmates to a woman's prison. This is what they're doing. What in the world is a federal judge weighing in on a matter like this? Why? Activism, idealism, ideologues installed for this very purpose, for this very day, for this very moment. Barack Obama was thinking ahead, and his Marxist band of merry men and women who were around the husk that we were pretending were president for the last 4 years, they were thinking ahead for this state. Remember what I just explained a minute ago? Democrats are always thinking long game. They always have, and they always are aware that what they truly want, the government that they want to craft, is one that forces you and is weaponized against you to do their will and do their bidding, because they can't win at the ballot box by telling the truth. So when they get a window of opportunity, they stockpile the government in subversive, secret ways where these little time bombs go off long after they're in power. USAID, financially speaking, is one of the great examples of that. They set these eternal traps. It's like you sweep the landscape of an old war-torn country, and every now and again there's still a live landmine. That's what Democrats do during those brief windows they have control. They plant landmines. And even after they're defeated, kaboom, they can still go off. Our political landmine, these federal judges that Barack Obama and the Husks team appointed after him. And they're just sowing chaos. And John Roberts comes out and lectures us about calling attention to it. Amazing. Although not amazing. A federal judge has ordered the Federal Bureau of Prisons to return biological men pretending to be women to women's prisons. In what universe does that make any damn sense? John Roberts, are you listening? I know you are. Our pulsing, throbbing stick in Washington, D.C., or certainly some of his clerks or somebody near him. I'd love to. Could somebody ring him up, send him a little note on behalf of me, and just ask, what does the gentle Chief Justice have to say about biological men being sent back to women's prisons by federal judge force? I mean, since he likes to weigh in, since he's now become a CNN political pundit, let's go live to John Roberts, who's standing outside the Supreme Court for his commentary. John, what do you think? I mean, that's what he does now. It's outrageous. This Boasberg, bag of bones, another federal judge on Thursday saying the Trump administration's response to his request for more information on Venezuelan deportation flights was woefully insufficient and evaded obligations to show they complied. You owe him nothing. This is the point. Woefully inefficient. Our plan, that is the president's plan. If I'm president of the United States and my national security team wants to deport dangerous criminal aliens, non-citizens, a federal judge steps in and says, I want to see your plans. And then I guess whatever they hand over to him, he says, this is woefully insufficient for me. Who the hell are you, bag of bones? Who are you? Who asked you? Just like who asked John Roberts his opinion of whether we should impeach a judge or not. Nobody cares. This really is, it's true. We are coming dangerously close to a real crisis where this country is going to be forced to take matters into our own hands. And by that I mean not violence. Don't misunderstand. Media Matter is going to pick up on that immediately. That's not what I mean. I don't mean violence. What I mean is we're going to start doing things that we think are in the best interests of the country. And whatever a federal judge has to say about it, be damned. No one's going to listen. If John Roberts does not do something about this and admonish this right now and put these judges in their proper place, we will just stop listening to judges. And the left will certainly do that, as they already do, by the way. They have already been doing that. Hell, AOC told Joe Biden he should just ignore judges. They were already inclined to do it. We've tried to play by the rules. Trump told Laura Ingraham earlier in the week, no, I don't intend to ignore a federal judge, but this guy's out of hand. He's out of line. Judge blocks DOGE. DOGE. Judge. I thought this was about the Department of Education. I'm waiting for the headline that says a judge blocks the president's DOE executive action, but he blocks the DOGE access to Social Security too. Federal judge temporarily blocking members of Elon's team from looking into the Social Security Administration system containing personal information, saying their work was likely an illegal fishing expedition. It's garbage. Elon Musk is fishing Social Security information. For what purpose exactly? He doesn't know, whoever this federal judge is. Oh, I'm sorry, she. Ellen Hollander of Maryland. They're trying to stop what they know is ultimately, bottom line, the strength of the Democrat Party. Illegals, vote buying through government transfer payments, taxpayer money funneled through these subversive organizations, buy-offs, phony money being funneled through a bloated bureaucratic Social Security system. The game is up for Democrats, and the only thing they can do to try to stop it is activate their activist federal judges.
Well, the numbers don't lie. Balance of Nature and the impact it's making every single day is astounding. You see the numbers for yourself on their website at balanceofnature.com. Listen to the stats from Balance of Nature, their worldwide success. You ready for this? More than 1,000 success stories reported every single month. Hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide. Millions of orders delivered each day. Billions. Yes, with a B, billions of fruits and vegetable supplements consumed by people who've decided to start living a better life. We take them at the house. I've got them up in the cabinet. Take them every day. There's only one number that's missing out of all of this, and that's you. Do what I did. Add yourself to these numbers. Start taking Balance of Nature. They're whole food supplements, like so many others around the world. And here's another number that'll get your attention. 35%. What is that? You use my name, Chris, as your discount code. You'll get 35% off, plus free shipping and a money-back guarantee. You got to use that discount code, Chris. 800-2468-751. And use the discount code Chris or order online, balanceofnature.com. Again, discount code Chris to get that 35% off plus free shipping. Hey, inflation still remains high, uncertainty clawing at the door, and wisdom says you got to secure what lasts. That's the 2025 1-ounce Silver Eagle from my friends at Global Coin. The U.S. Mint shines the storm with this flawless MS-70 coin, and you can get it through Global Coin. This is a company that I personally use and have trusted. It's not a gamble. This is authentic silver. You can hold a real legacy asset. Global Coin stands for expertise and experience. No games whatsoever, just real value. Call 888-560-3125 and lock in this pristine MS-70 masterpiece. Just $49. Free shipping and no sales tax. Everything else pretty shaky, economically speaking, but this is an asset that will not disappear. They back it with a 30-day return policy, too. Trust not negotiable to Global Coin. Visit shopglobalcoin.com/Stigall or 888-560-3125. Inflation won't wait. Supplies won't last. 888-560-3125.
Welcome in on this Friday. Hope you're well. Thanks so much for joining us. My thanks to Bob France for filling in for a couple of the days this week while I was away doing some really great work, or at least not. No, I won't pat myself on the back and say it's great work, but I participated with people that are doing great work. I was privileged to just have a small part of it. Charlie, sorry, my brain is not engaging as fast as my mouth is moving today. Sorry, guys. Been away, out of practice a couple of days. Let's try that again. Charlie Kirk's TPUSA, you all know that. He has a faith division of this, and our friend Pastor Lucas Miles, who heads it, we've been friends for years, and he said, Chris, why don't you come to our Pastors Summit down here in Georgia this year, and you lead a panel discussion on media and what pastors, and this was a huge, pastors from all over the country, and what pastors maybe should understand about media and how people of faith can influence media and impact media. It was a wonderful panel. Billy Hallowell from the Christian Broadcasting Network was there. Gene Bailey, who I'd not met before, but he has a huge, huge following and show called Flashpoint. And then Megan Basham, a dear woman that we love, author of an important book, probably one of the most important books about the church and potential corruption in the church that's been written in a long while, called Shepherds for Sale. I commend that book to you. And I would just say, on a personal note, Meg, we just found out here recently, is battling colon cancer. And she had just started some chemotherapy treatment and came to this conference. She looked great. She still feels great. I mean, you couldn't, she was not in any state where you would have thought she was ill had you not known otherwise. She was carrying her port with her, which she said, does this look very stylish, as you're trying to look great with a port? I think the world of her and Bill and Gene and the people at TP USA Faith. And this was such a special event, and it's unlike anything that I've ever attended before. It was just a real honor to be a part of it. Riley Gaines was there. Dr. Ben Carson was there. So that's where I've been the last couple of days. And I put some pictures up if you'd like to see on my social media, if you want to check it out. Most of them are up there, Facebook, Instagram, on X as well. Bob Franz, I appreciate him being in the chair while I was away. Glad to be back with you on what has been a busy week. The news I knew was going to get big and hot and heavy while away. So I was glad to be here and round out the week. It's also Open Line Friday at 855-STIGAL, and I will get to your calls, I promise. I've just got a lot to catch up on. Of course, one of the biggest bits of news, and one of the most significant, in my opinion, of the Trump administration is going to be his executive order to rid us, finally, since the 70s, of the Department of Education. I know the people at the American Federation for Children were thrilled about this development yesterday. Brian Jodice is the National Press Secretary there, and he joins us again. Brian, great day yesterday. Good morning.
Yeah, it sure was, Chris. Boy, that sounds like an incredible experience. I'm glad you got to experience that the last few days. And yeah, a lot of news swirling out of Washington. Big day out of the DOE. So excited to talk about it with you today.
I guess I don't want to start negative, but I will ask, because we know ultimately, in order for this to really take root, it does take Congress to act. At all? Is there a chance? I mean, you're going to need 7 Democrats in the Senate. The Democrats love the Department of Education. Yeah. Like I love carbs. You know what I mean?
Well, you are looking pretty good this day, my friend. But and look, you're on one. I was watching before. Probably get you a little more fired up, maybe through parts of our conversation this morning, because you're pointing out a lot of things that maybe have your blood pressure rising a little bit. And so to get that done, yeah, it does take that act of Congress. And so that's a big lift. The president's made it clear what he wants to do here. Secretary McMahon's going to follow that directive and do everything she can to, if not fully close this thing, at least shrink it down to a more suitable size. And so I think what they did yesterday was take steps in the direction to do that. But there's reasons why. And I brought some stats today, Chris, that I think might raise your blood pressure just a little bit, but I think they help illustrate kind of where we're at right now. And it just goes to show how big this thing has grown. This bureaucratic middleman in Washington is not serving students across America. States have more than 2,000 unique data reporting requirements from the U.S. Department of Education annually. And under President Biden, they added rules that impose nearly $3.9 billion in costs and 4.2 million paperwork hours. There's just too much happening in this bureaucracy in Washington that's not student-centric. And so taking steps yesterday, promises made, promises kept from the president to close the Department of Education, do everything they can to get duplicative services out of there, to get waste, fraud, and abuse out of there. That's what happened yesterday. It's a step in the right direction. Let's get education back to the states. Let's get parents more empowered.
Brian, my entire family, my way of life as the Stigall family knew it, was completely upended during COVID. I know many others had much worse situations. I'm not crying personally here, but I'm sharing this story to illustrate a point. My kids' school was closed for well over a calendar year, and they really would have had it too if they could have, as was my church. And ultimately, we decided to take one of our children, put her in a private Christian school. We left our community. We became Southern Baptists. We were former Methodists. It's like my entire life radically shifted, and my family's, because of COVID. And the reason I say that is not to be self-involved, but to make the point that it took COVID to slap the Stigall family in the face and realize, frankly, the lies and the abuse that we were living for a very long time. I think many millions of families feel the same way.
Yeah, I almost got emotional listening to your story because so many Americans relate to it. My family as well. You know, we went through a school move from public to private school during the pandemic because we never got an answer as to when schools were going to open again. And then Randi Weingarten has the gall to go on national television and use revisionist history this week, talking about wanting schools to open back up as she stood in the schoolhouse door for 2 years, shutting down schools across America. And families
I have some of that,
better.
Brian. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me play some.
Please.
Not that I really want to trouble everybody on a Friday with this, but 11:17, boys. Let's hear from the distinguished Ms. Weingarten.
COVID was a terrible time for us. And as you know, because I was on your show a lot and other shows, I wanted schools to be reopened as early as April of 2020. The issue was the fear and the issue was the safety issues. But COVID has really hurt in so many ways. But this has been a Republican talking point for a long time.
Brian, she's a liar. COVID and she and people that backed her destroyed kids' educations. You've charted. I mean, the New York Times has written about it. These people did more to destroy kids' educations, which already weren't great and trending poorly anyway, and just put the foot on the gas pedal.
She's from the George Costanza School of Information. It's not a lie if you believe it. And you're right. Families were hurt. Kids were hurt. They're the ones that were left at the wayside. This, Chris, to the larger issue, this is what has been the issue with that union stranglehold over education, because what's missing from the equation are parents and students. They're the ones that should be centered at this. They're the ones who deserve a seat at the table. But, you know, they fight for something like this bureaucratic control. And maybe this is why we really do believe this can be the golden age of American education, because maybe, just maybe, bureaucratic control is finally being busted up once and for all. And by doing things like reining in the Department of Education, by doing things like sending education back to the states, by finding creative ways to unlock school choice across America through the Educational Choice for Children Act, we can get it student-centered. We can get this thing back to the end user who matters the most. And I'll relate to you on the pandemic front. You know, we sat not knowing what was going to happen for a year. When we made that decision to move from public to private, we called the data manager at our local school and said, we're unenrolling our child. And they said, thanks, bye, and just hung up the phone.
Yeah.
No one asked why. Didn't ask why, couldn't have cared less.
That's why I choose to believe. This came up during this pastor summit that I was just attending to. We talked a lot about this. God was in COVID. I believe that wholeheartedly. Sometimes it takes a great big spotlight like COVID to expose how radical and off-kilter things had gotten. DEI, I think, as a concept, was exposed for what it is finally, the radical Marxist garbage that it is, Brian. So at the American Federation for Children, and Brian Jodice is the national press secretary there, your intention, obviously, I know, is to continue to advocate for this, but states are growing. It's coming on. It's not happening as fast as I'd like to see. I know you guys too. School choice, universal school choice, state by state. I assume you're watching that carefully.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's always been our mission here to ensure that families across America, especially low-income families, get equal access to the K-12 schools of their choice. And for far too long, folks have stood in the way of that. And so this advent of school choice and the way the momentum continues to build across the country shows us that there are more families being empowered by getting their kids in the place that's the right fit, just like you guys did, just like we've done, just like families across America. And so what we're watching is not just this national movement to get more school choice back to the states. We believe there's a way we can do that without the federal government being involved in it. Best part about it. But then also we're working hard in states across America to encourage legislatures to be big and bold right? And we get involved politically to ensure that those leaders are there that can be big and bold for education reform and school choice across America. And so we're following states, got our eyes. A lot of folks got their eyes on Texas right now. Really big program that's getting ready to pass. Kudos to Governor Abbott and the folks on the ground in Texas for what could be the largest day one school choice program. So momentum continues to build because this is what parents and families want, right? It's wildly
and the communists, the communists in Illinois are about to try something too, which I'm gonna cover this a little later in the show. Unfortunately, we're out of time here, Brian, but I'm grateful for your perspective, and I will have you back on this Illinois thing too, because people need to know what's going on in that insane state. Brian Jodice, American Federation for Children. Thank you, sir. All right, we're an even $2,000 away. That's it. It's $2,000 left. I think in the next 2 hours of show we can do $2,000. If I don't know, what's the math on that, Ed? You want to break that down? I mean, this is a huge audience, so mathematically extrapolated $2,000 over this vast audience. We can get this done for Food for the Poor. And the reason I'm pushing this today, look, in 1 week you guys came through with the $40,000 goal, and I can't thank you enough. And they were so stunned at your generosity, and then you just kept giving anyway. And because I guess I'm a little ADD or whatever, now I see us sitting at $78,000 this morning. We are $2,000 away from doubling what Food for the Poor was hoping that we could raise. And you've well blown past that. So now I'd like to round it out and double it. I would like to say that we officially doubled the ask this year, and we're $2,000 away, Ed. You got the math on it?
Just how much specifically?
Like just a breakout. Yeah. It's always dangerous to do math on the fly.
No, you're $2,030 out.
Yeah, but I'm saying extrapolated over our vast audience, what would that be? How many people would have to call and give, I'm not even talking like I need somebody to give $2,000 right now.
Right.
I mean, whatever you can give, right?
Yes, you need the the small donor campaign. All right, so
yeah.
Let's do it.
What would that be? See, we're doing fast math. Don't do it. Don't even bother, because we're going to get the email. ChrisStigall.com. You can go to the Feed Their Future banner right there at the top of the page. Every nickel of this goes to Food for the Poor and helping feed these, particularly these vulnerable 5 years old and under. The only meal they get in the course of an entire day, often, is this school lunch meal that Food for the Poor provides. For a $100 donation, they can take that $100 and feed one child for an entire year at Food for the Poor. This is the work they do. I hope you'll investigate them. I love these people. I love what they do. I love their heart and their mission work, and I love their love for the Lord. They are a Christ-centered charity, so they don't just feed kids with food. They feed them with the gospel. And you can feel good knowing that you've given to a great cause when you give to Food for the Poor. So go to ChrisStigall.com, Feed Their Future banner, or call today, 855-330-4673, 855-330-4673. Certainly not asking you to give $2,000. I'm asking you to give whatever you can. Now, if somebody wanted to give $2,000, I'll make a hero out of you right now. I'll hoist you on my shoulders. I'll bring you on the show. Ed, we can make him a guest. Somebody, $2,000. Hell, you can buy your way on the show right now if you want to for $2,000, Ed.
If you give $2,000 and you get us over the top today, you will be a guest on Monday morning's show. I promise. All right.
There you go. All right. Okay. $2,000 and you get a guest spot. First person to give it. Now, if you're late, if you're beaten to the punch, you can feel good about the charity, but don't get mad. It's first come, first serve. All right. You're booked on the show. We hoist you on our shoulders at doubling our pledge. That's huge. Thank you guys very much. Let's go to the phones. I have been busy today trying to catch up on Open Line Friday. My apologies. Brandon's in Ohio to kick it off today. Brandon, thanks a lot for your patience. Good morning. Welcome in.
Good morning. How you doing?
Doing great, sir. What's on your mind today?
Just a thought. Just to box out Judge Bagabones. Trump, as Commander-in-Chief, can declare war on Venezuela. Now, that doesn't mean we have to actually go to war. It could just be war on paper. The only people that could overturn him would be Congress, and as you know, we own Congress. So just as a thought, he declared, which he said, essentially we're at war because they keep pumping in on purpose all their illegal gang members just to get rid of them and make them our problem. I mean, we fought cold wars. We fought wars that didn't involve bullets and missiles. So just as a tactical move, he could declare war on Venezuela and then use that as leverage against Judge Bagabones to say, hey, I have powers to start shipping all these illegal immigrants criminal illegal immigrants, out of town. What do you think?
Interesting thought, Brandon. Very interesting thought. I appreciate it. I can imagine a federal judge overruling a declaration of war. That's how crazy things have gotten. Okay, I like the thought. Roy's in Dallas. Roy, I got about 30 seconds. I'm sorry, but you've waited long enough, so I wanted to give you a shot. Take it away, Roy.
Yesterday, I understand that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials are possibly going to invoke the State Secrets Privilege Act. And I understand that was designed after a series of Supreme Court decisions and cases, which allows the government to protect sensitive national security information from being disclosed. And that also includes the George Soros lawyers as well as the ACLU. And
okay.
I think,
all right. Well, we got big thinkers out there. People are thinking deeply about this stuff. I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you very, very much. By the way, again, thanks again to Bob Franz for sitting in the last couple of days while we were away. Bill Burr, a very funny comedian, says that he is angry with Elon Musk and goes at him on The View. And I want so much to like Bill Burr. And I wanted so much for Bill Burr to stay out of this kind of stuff because he's so darn good and really talented and funny. But it's sad to see what he's become, like so many other comedians. In 11:20 here, take a listen.
But I just feel like someone needs to bring the boiling water down to a simmer, and everybody on both sides, like if you watch CNN, Fox, you go online, or you listen to politicians, it's all, and then you walk out on the street and someone's like, hey, how you doing? You're like, good. So I don't think they're living in like a reality.
But is there anybody getting your ire up these days more than usual?
Nerds.
Yeah,
the nerds that own the politician, all these tech nerds that want to build robots because they don't know how to talk to hot women, they're gonna take over the world. They're going to take over. They are literally going to replace us. We're like beta right now, and they're coming out with like the VCR. And I think Elon has got the rockets going because they realize there's other Earths out there, and they're going to trash this one, and because they don't have any concern for it, and they're going to move on to the next Earth. And, everybody's going to be standing down here with your blue and red ties going, wait a minute, I was on your side, and they're just going to leave.
But you were talking about death, and you're sad. Do they not realize that they're going to die, these people? They don't realize that eventually everybody dies.
I always wondered that about all religions, where they always talk about a wrathful God and, will send you to hell. And it's like, none of you guys are operating like you fear this, the way you run your religion.
That's right.
So Bill Burr believes, I guess, the left is, if we're going I can't even believe that this morning the theological kickoff discussion is Joy Behar and Bill Burr, but okay. They're having a discussion about what happens after you die, and they're holding up the left as the model? This seems like a great time to bring in Ned Ryan, founder and CEO of American Majority, author of American Leviathan, and a brand new documentary available now, too, I want to talk about. Ned, you're the perfect guy as a jumping off point for this clip. It's amazing to me that they go theological on The View and seem to think that they're on the side of virtue here. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Chris. Yeah, pretty sad. I mean, watching the emasculated man sitting there with the women who are a cancer on our society trying to talk about deeper theological issues, in which, let's face it, most of the left rejects many of our traditional Judeo-Christian values. Although I will say this, Chris, I think it's important for us to have the conversation writ large that I believe all people are people of faith, and that we all have a set of presuppositions and biases by which we view the world around us and make decisions as to what is right and wrong. And, with me, I'm a evangelical Christian with deeply held views on a transcendent creator and eternal life and saving grace of Jesus Christ. But the left also has a faith system, and their faith system obviously leads us to other different conclusions in which, a lot of those things about a transcendent creator and inherent rights and absolute right and wrong, those are dismissed, and you end up with what, we just watched, in which very confusing conversation about what they actually believe in regards to what comes next. But also it leads them to believe that the state and these things in the here and now are a source of salvation, that the state and government give rights, and that we are not to touch it. And that is what they ultimately believe leads to salvation in this life. And so you see very diametrically opposed faith systems at play right now.
That is so smart. Everybody believes in something. I heard somebody say once, and that's exactly right. Even if you think you're an atheist and you have no religion, that unto itself is its own kind of faith system, isn't it?
It is, because let's face it, we as finite human beings, we do not have a perfect knowledge set. We will never fully understand or comprehend every last piece of information or data or facts about this world, about this universe. And at some point, there becomes an element of faith in which you actually have to take something at, a faith level and say, I believe that A and B exist, therefore C and D probably exist, but I have no absolute confirmation of that. But the left wants to come with you, and their gospel and their belief system is really scientism, in which they believe that somehow by the power of science, we will reach perfection in the here and now. I mean, that really is a deeply ingrained progressive leftist ideology. And somehow this imperfect practice of science by imperfect, finite human beings is going to lead to some sort of apotheosis and deification of mankind in the here and now. And it's a fool's errand. It's absurd on its face.
Ned Ryan is a founder and CEO of American Majority. Again, the full-length American Leviathan documentary is available right now, and you can check it out at Ned's X profile. If you want to go there, it's pinned up there right now. And his book, of course, is American Leviathan as well. I didn't mean to go theological here, but I think it's kind of interesting, and I'm glad that we are, because I think it's important. Look, AI is something that gives me the jitters, too. Yep. What I have been writing about over the last couple of weeks and acknowledging is the left owned, as you just said, they've owned the technology space. They've been big tech. They've been the ones, we've been under the thumb of their technological advances, and all of a sudden the worm has turned, and you're taking things like AI and unleashing it on this Leviathan, as you call it, of the federal government. And now suddenly people like Bill Burr and Joy are concerned about our eternity because we're using science to reduce the size of government, I think. Did I interpret that right?
You did. And I mean, Elon Musk and DOGE, I think is one of the most important reform movements we've seen in decades, if not ever, in which Donald Trump has unleashed them to go, we have a situation here in D.C. What's interesting to me, Chris, is that it all started about waste, fraud, and abuse, right? Elon's going to come in with DOGE, and we're going to figure out the waste, fraud, and abuse. And you kind of see this slow-moving epiphany journey for Elon, in which started there, and now we're at, wait a minute, we have rule of the bureaucrat. We actually have a slush fund money laundering operation of the left that is our government, in which taxpayer dollars are given to essentially the left to then fund their pet projects, but also fund deeply anti-American projects like this massive illegal immigration, but also funding entities that I would argue, Chris, their sole purpose is to undermine our society and our country writ large. It to me is something that has to be successful, Chris. The thing I want to stress to people, and again, I hope they watch the documentary. If you're not on X, go to AmericanLeviathan.com. But people need to understand that what is taking place in D.C. has been going on actually for over a century. We've had two very different competing forms of government in which the rule of the bureaucrat was always intended by progressives. I see some people going, oh, DC's broken. I can't believe these bureaucrats are out of control. No, that's not a bug. That's a feature. That was a feature of what progressives wanted. And I think the real struggle, if you were to get down to it, come down to two things. Are we going to go down the rule of the bureaucrat, which tends to become authoritarian and totalitarian, or are we going to actually restore representative government in which duly elected representatives of the American people are the ones actually legislating, actually governing? And it really comes down to the other issue, Chris, is who decides? And in our constitutional republic, the whole point was that the duly elected representatives who are made stewards of the power and money given to them by the American people are the ones who to decide. And that in DC's mind, that was Donald Trump's greatest sin. And his great sin was essentially declaring, I decide. And that's what really brought this conflict to the surface between administrative state and constitutional republic, because Donald J. Trump rejects the premise that the administrative state is legitimate.
I was just discussing this morning that the left knows they can never tell the truth about what they stand for. So when they get these windows of time where they win elections, they place these landmines like activist federal judges or USAID money they're landmines, and they're designed to go off in Republican times of leadership, I believe. And what Elon and DOGE have done, they're uncovering these landmines, and these landmine sweeps, they're truly, literally draining their little game plan. And Project 2025, you and I think talked about it back then, when the left was shrieking hysterically about that thing. It's because, in my view, it was the first time conservatives, libertarians, constitutionalists, whatever, got together in a room and said, what can we do to really make lasting change to the overall structure of government if we win this time? And I think the left knew we were coming for their game. We were looking long ball for the very first time. Am I about right?
You are. And you know, I use Woodrow Wilson's quote, multiple times in the documentary, but I think it's important for us to have that same mentality, which is a bit ironic, Chris, but I'm gonna quote Wilson here. And this was a few years before he took the White House, in which he said, "We are not bound to adhere to the doctrines held by the signers of the Declaration of Independence. We are as free as they were to make or unmake governments." And so progressives were very hostile. The whole point of the progressive movement was to destroy the moral and political authority of our Constitution, destroy the machinery of the Republic, to unmake our constitutional republic. We should have that same mindset. Right now, we have the political power and the political will in which we should say and go, we are not bound to adhere to the doctrines of the progressives. We're not bound to adhere to their administrative state. We are as free as they were to make or unmake governments. And it's time to unmake the administrative state and restore the republic. And that's why Donald Trump and Elon Musk must succeed. This is about restructuring and dismantling and devolving and, quite frankly, shattering into a million pieces a deeply unconstitutional, un-American form of government and restoring representative government back into this country.
Brilliant. That's why I'm so glad you're here, because I knew you were going to be brilliant, Ned Ryan. With about 30 seconds, where do you think Republicans take this? I'm starting to hear some smatterings of Republicans on Capitol Hill going, well, now, wait a minute. We're senators, Elon Musk. We should have a say in this matter. Are Republicans going to fall in line here? They're going to be puffed up about this.
I certainly hope so. And I'll make this as quick as possible. One of the greatest facilitators of the administrative state is the weakness and lack of political courage that Congress has shown for decades. They have subdelegated their authority to these unelected bureaucrats. If Congress would actually like to step up to the plate and actually govern and actually legislate and actually say, we're not going to blindly fund these unelected bureaucrats who are doing the real governing. We're going to pull back funding and take back our constitutional Article 1 rights. That would be a lovely thing for them to do instead of whining and complaining about what's taking place.
Ned Ryan, this important book made an important documentary. I hope people check it out, read it, and watch it. American Leviathan, the documentary available now at AmericanLeviathan.com, you said, Ned, right?
Correct.
And your book, of course. Pick that up, please, a already New York Times bestseller. Ned, thank you, my friend. Have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
More Stigall Show in a minute. Glad to have you here on Friday's edition of the Chris Stigall Show. Appreciate Bob Franz filling in the last couple of days. I appreciated the invitation from the Turning Point Faith folks. Our friend Lucas Miles, Charlie Kirk was down there, Matt Walsh was down there. We had a wonderful time, a spiritually healing time, as a matter of fact. You could really feel the presence of the Holy Spirit in that place, and it was it was an honor to have a small part of it. I just can't tell you how rejuvenated I was. There are people doing such wonderful things in Jesus' name across this country right now. So I don't know what you're feeling, and I realize that mainstream news is showing you a lot of ugliness rearing its head, the hissing and the writhing of the American left, and I genuinely believe darkness, embracing this hysterical destruction. I saw Jimmy Kimmel winking this week during his monologue at torching Teslas and setting both cars and dealerships and things like that on fire. They're cheering an American company stock dropping. They wish and hope that Tesla folds as a company. Now suddenly they don't seem to care so much about jobs, I guess. Isn't that interesting? As much as they scream and yell about government jobs, when a private sector company making a product people want and sells it, they cheer its destruction because they don't like the guy running its politics. It's dark stuff. And sometimes if you watch only mainstream media and you see that kind of stuff, you think we're awash in it. And we are, but I don't think it's prevailing. I don't think it's winning. I think there is a resurgence in this country. I think there is a clarity. a bright white dividing line between right and wrong. I think people are returning to the Word of God like we haven't seen in a long time. We're seeing young men returning to the church, which brings me to a rather interesting stat and something that's kind of uncomfortable, and I don't really want to talk about it, but I think we should. There's something going on in this country between young men and young women. I still haven't quite put my finger on what it is about young women and why they're trending this way. But let me give this to you from Steve Kornacki on MSNBC yesterday or the day before, 11:14. Take a listen.
White women with at least a college degree, the only group of white voters that really kind of is on the left politically, aligned with progressive causes, democratic politics. Give you an example here. It's that DEI question, right here, that we asked about in our poll. We had two big statements we read to voters. Basically, do you want to continue DEI programs or do you think they should be ended? And again, look at this divide here. White men, no degree, end it. White men with a degree, end it, they say. White women, no degree, end it, they say, by double digits. And then white women with a college degree, completely different by a nearly 40-point margin.
Question. Who's teaching in public school today? Fast Eddie?
College-educated white women?
The majority of them, yeah. Now, I have a couple of male friends who are public school teachers. The vast majority of public educators in this country are college-educated white women. And you just heard Steve Kornacki, Kaki Kornacki, lay it out there on MSNBC for the liberal audience to consume. Those people are teaching America's youth. And that's all you need to know. That's why Randy Weingarten. That's why the hissing and writhing and screaming and screeching. That's why, because everyone else, other women who maybe are not college-level educated, and certainly men, and I, by the way, I think independent of race, I bet you'd be surprised if you looked at Hispanic and black men versus women. The liberal white woman is a thing, and it's why we've been talking about it for a while. Not all women, but liberal white women, college-educated women are something. I don't know how else to put this. It must be addressed because they are the ones that are in the position of great influence over America's youth right now. And I realize, I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and I'm going to get into more detail because I think it's critically important. I believe one of the single most important things next to reforming the Department of Justice in this country is ridding ourselves of this Department of Education and taking our children's educations back into, if not the home, certainly the private sector. You cannot hand the next generation and generations over to college-educated, rabid leftist white women and expect not to get the same thing. What's the old adage? You can't send your kids off to Rome and not expect them to come back as Romans. I mean, folks, this has to be addressed, and Trump knows it. Elon knows it. It's why they made it a priority. It's why it needs to be made a priority, because if you don't stop the pipeline of children being brought up to hate this country, radical, frothing at the mouth, Tesla-burning lunatics, that's what public education largely is pumping out. They're certainly not pumping out kids that learn. The stats bear it out. Sorry. Not trying to pick on or offend those of you who teach. I know a lot of you do great work. You can't save this country without saving its kids.
Hey there, it's Chris Stigall. You know, this past summer, I went on a cruise with Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Mike Gallagher, my Salem radio colleagues, and I met so many listeners like you who have been on my PhD weight loss program journeys, and I decided for myself it was time to jump in. I wanted to give this Dr. Ashley everybody's been talking about call myself. Dr. Ashley Lucas and her team customize plans for your body to make weight loss simple, and they provide 80% of your food at no additional cost. They treat your whole person, and so I've decided to join so many of you Join Sebastian Gorka. Join Mike Gallagher. And all the weight they've lost, I'd like to do it myself. I've decided to call up my PhD weight loss. I hope you'll join me. Maybe we can start this weight loss journey together. Reach out. Get started. Tell them I sent you and said hi. I'd love to hear how you're doing at 864-664-1900. That's 864-664-1900 or myphdweightloss.com. Don't forget to tell them Chris Stigall is going to start losing weight with you. Excellence in dentistry. That's what you're going to get at Williamsburg Dental. My friend Bob Spinato is back on the phone. He's in Broomall, just off the Blue Route. And with 2 new associates, now you can expand and offer more hours, maybe evening hours, possibly weekends, Bob.
Yeah, one of the things that I told them from early on when they started with me was the value of not only their own time, but other people's times. And they run on a similar schedule that I do. If you've got a 1 o'clock appointment, you're in their chair at 1 o'clock. And it's something that across the board at Williamsburg Dental, we really pride ourselves on, whether it's an appointment with the hygienist or whether it's an appointment with one of our doctors. The other thing is we now have some expanded hours in the evenings, and even there's some discussion about opening again on some Saturdays for services.
Yeah, so, but not you. You're fishing. You're not kidding anybody. It's not you going to be working on Saturday. Come on,
well, I'm in my 33rd year, and it should be the young guns.
That's so right. You've earned it. You've earned it.
I feel like I have. Thank you.
Pick up the phone or go online, make that appointment, 610-353-2700 or williamsburg-dental.com.
We are getting very, very close, by the way, to the Food for the Poor goal that I was asking us to try to get to. We already reached that $40,000 goal in the first week of this campaign. I wanted to double that. I got ambitious, and I said, can we double it? We are $900 away from doubling it this morning. I knew we're inching all that much closer. If you can do this today, it would be huge. Lynn, she is a native Kansas City, and she said, now living in Wyoming. Sorry, somebody got mad at me for saying that the other day. Wyoming, Rock Springs, Wyoming. She is a native Kansas City, and she just donated over $200, $250. In Chicago, Jeff just made a donation. Thank you, Jeff. In Oxford, Karen said, love your show. Also the podcast and the Harumph newsletter. Awesome, Karen. Thank you for your donation. Teresa in Drexel Hill gave $100. Look, I'm trying to get us to this $80,000 mark with Food for the Poor because that would double our goal. We hit our goal in week number 1 of $40,000. I think by the end of this hour, we're going to be able to make double that pledge to help these hungry kids in El Salvador, courtesy of this incredible organization called Food for the Poor, who, again, not only give kids meals to sustain them throughout the course of the whole year with your $100 donation that feeds a child for a whole year, but they also give them the gospel, and that's just as paramount of importance as food itself. So please, if you can, help us double this today. Help us get to that $80,000 mark. And I've already been bragging on you that you were the most generous. I couldn't believe it, at $40,000 in week number 1. We double this. I mean, this is, it's historic for a new show here on the Salem News Channel and the Salem Radio Network. And I am humbled, so humbled that this audience stepped up in such a way. And if I can report back to the Food for the Poor folks that we doubled that $40,000 goal today, wow. Thank you. Go to chrisstigall.com. Click on the Feed Their Future banner if you want to know how to do that. It's a little blue banner right at the top at chrisstigall.com. Feed Their Future. Click on it. Give what you can. You can call them today as well if you'd like. Operators standing by to take your donations that way if you'd like. You can call 855-330-4673 or text my last name, Stigall, to 51555. Let's hit 80 grand by the conclusion of today's show. I know we're going to do it. Thank you so much. All right, yesterday, the White House. Big news. Here we go.
Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all.
And then you had Linda McMahon, the woman who said her job was to put herself out of a job. Secretary of Education responded this way.
I can tell you we know that the task ahead, certainly has some hurdles. But what my desire is, and what I'm going to be working to do, is to work in conjunction with Congress. I think if we can show them that the best plan is to have states in control of education for their communities, for their students, for their teachers, for their parents, that is the best thing, because the president believes, as do I, that the best education is closest to closest to the student, and we can accomplish that.
Yep, that's Linda McMahon. I love when she said her job is to put herself out of a job. Also in the room, there were a lot of people in attendance yesterday at the White House. Deb Kraulidis was one of them, Vice President of Moms for America. We talked with her last at the National Religious Broadcasters event down in Dallas. She's back with us, momsforamerica.us. Deb, what a day yesterday, huh?
Hey, good morning. It was historic. It sure was.
I really didn't imagine ever seeing a day that any president would ever take an axe to this Department of Education, because it's such a third rail, you know? It's just one of those things that, and I know Donald Trump was careful to say, this is not a war on teachers, which is what the teachers' unions are going to make it, correct?
Correct. Right, he did. He was very specific. You know, we all know that the quality of public education has decreased and declined. Something needs to be done. Something needs to be looked at. Something needs to be addressed. We are just thrilled that he is making new plans for education, because, boy, is there a problem here or what? We pay the most per student. We rank last, just about last in proficiency. You know, the goal of the Department of Education was to improve the quality of education nationwide. Well, that has failed. So what do we do now? Keep giving great big budgets to a department that's failing, and that's not good business. That's not good for America. That's not good for our children. And bringing it back to the states, 100% great idea. It was really electric in the room.
I was going to say, who was in the room yesterday for this event? I saw some young kids at the desk. There were some teachers and mothers and parents, fathers,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
great question. Well, for us, Moms for America, and there was several organizations, obviously, there that had been in the fight protecting our kids and concerned about education. Of course, that's a huge topic for moms, obviously. We had 15 moms and students ranging in age. And then what they did, there was two rooms. There's the east and the west room, and they had overflow in the other room. They took some of the kids, I think there was 14 or 15 kids that they took, and they let them sit behind the president, which was a great visual, and they got to sign, you know, their kind of executive order. And there was a lot of media, there was a lot of organizations, there was a lot of education leaders, teachers, parents, a lot of governors. It was really a very diverse group. But
yes.
Just everybody was there to make a difference, to be a part of this. I should say, as the president makes a difference on this.
Caroline Levitt went out to talk to the press about this, and I had to laugh. I was actually in transit flying home. I was watching it on my phone, and she strolls up to the press, who, you know, they're salivating, can't wait to start, you know, chirping at her about it. And the first question out of a guy's mouth, I don't know who it was in the press corps, he says, "What about student loans? What about student?" I mean, that was immediate. The first thing they panicked about was, what about student loans? And in fact, he does address this incidentally, Deb. Let me get cut number 1125 here, just so people know what he had to say specifically about the services the Department of Education provides. Take a listen.
But the department's useful functions, and such as, and they're in charge of them, Pell Grants, Title I funding, resources for children with disabilities and special needs will be preserved, fully preserved. They're all going to be so. If you look at the Pell Grants, it's supposed to be a very good program, Title I funding and resources for children with special disabilities and special needs. They're going to be preserved in full and redistributed to various other agencies and departments that will take very good care of.
So, Deb, here's the thing, and the reason I played that and the reason I want to address it is I find I'll set aside the children with special needs for a moment, because focus specifically on Pell Grants, student loans, and things of that nature. Isn't it ironic that we are at some of the lowest global proficiency rates in reading, math, science, and the like, and the first question out of the left's mouths are, what about college? That's bonkers. Does anybody catch that?
Yeah, it'd be very interesting. And you do hear this argument from everyone. In fact, I did media interviews yesterday. What about what about the funding? Okay, so the average is about 10% that you get from the federal government. But the strings that are attached to that 10%, that average 10%, some states get 5%, some get 16 or 20. It varies. The strings that are attached to that between DEI or transgender mandates is, it comes with a price. And that's really, I think, what the president is saying, too. With money comes all kinds of strings attached to it. We don't need Washington, D.C., regulating local schools and, being a part of different agendas that have nothing to do with education. So, yes, he did. He said all of those special fundings and all of those grants, if everybody's concerned about that, will be distributed through other agencies and departments. So the goal is to improve the quality of education, to bring it down to the local level. I think every school is unique. Every state is unique. We can see it even just with the funding. And it's not a one-size-fits-all policy. And we shouldn't treat our schools or our students like that. You know what? I think their budget, Chris, I'm just looking it up, is $268 billion. Like President Trump said when he was standing up at the podium, he's like, I see huge buildings for Department of Education and just all kinds of money and budgets and all that. And what's happening to our education system? It's failing.
Deb Kraulidis, Vice President, Moms for America, momsforamerica.us. You do great work, Deb. Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you so much. I tell you, my offer still stands, and you guys... Well, never should I doubt this audience, and I didn't doubt it. I knew. I felt very confident in sticking my neck out. Ladies and gentlemen, we just crested our doubling of our goal at Food for the Poor. Because you're awesome. You absolutely kick butt. I knew you would. We're at $81,000 this morning. That is outstanding. Life-changing donations you guys are giving to Food for the Poor. Thank you so much. Salvador in Cincinnati gave just a bit ago. In Philadelphia, Joe. Now, Joe gave over $1,000. And everybody that's been giving $1,000, I'm making an honorary member of the Harumph Society, my 3 times a week newsletter, which, by the way, while I was away, Fast Eddie, this is one of those things that I promise people if they become Harumphers. When I'm away, on the occasion that I happen to be away and news breaks, that's a place to go, the Harumph Society, because I posted a special edition newsletter there yesterday. But everybody that's given $1,000 in this campaign, that is so unbelievably generous. That feeds 10 kids for an entire year in El Salvador. I said, I'd love to do something for your generosity, so I'm making Joe an honorary lifetime member at the Harumph Society, and I did this for about 40 other people who've stepped up and given over $1,000. That's not. I never asked for that. That was never an expectation that you guys would be that generous, and some 40 of you gave over $1,000 during this drive, which is just unbelievably generous. And Joe, thank you. He really helped push us as well as the rest of you. Dan in Westerville. In Royersford, Elaine in Parma, Lisa also in Parma. It was Carl, Lovingston, Judith. Thank you, guys, so much. So we're at $81,000 for our Food for the Poor campaign. We've just over doubled what we were hoping to achieve. We reached our goal in week number 1. This is the single best audience, I am convinced, that anybody in broadcasting, streaming, whatever you want to call this, there can't be a better, more generous audience than you. There just can't be. Thank you. Thank you for making this work for these people that work so hard in just desperately impoverished countries like El Salvador. These little kids malnourished like you wouldn't believe. And $100 feeds one child for an entire year there. And they get the word of the Lord. They get the gospel. And that's equally as important. That's the work at Food for the Poor. And you can go to chrisstigall.com and click on that Feed Their Future banner and give if you'd like. Or you can call. There's a number to easily call and donate. Please still do at 855-330-4673. But thank you. So awesome. We doubled it. Ed, I didn't doubt him. I couldn't doubt him after raising our goal in week number 1. But now we've doubled it. Thank you guys so much. Isn't that awesome?
That's awesome, Chris.
Harumph.
That's right. We give him a harumph.
I didn't get a harumph out of that guy. Give the governor a harumph. Harumph. You watch your ass.
Well done, guys. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you guys very much. Now, on to a story quickly I just want to address because I don't know what it means. From Axios, buy now, pay later for your burger. Are people doing this? My son did a little door dashing here not too long ago. He actually makes some decent money doing it. But apparently now, something called Klarna, which I think I know. Ed, do you know Klarna? Have you used it? You use DoorDash? You do any of this?
I mean, I haven't used Klarna. I know like it's a financing thing, but I haven't used it, no.
Buy now, pay later options. Klarna is apparently like it lends you money to a degree, I guess. Is that your understanding?
My understanding is that, like, yes, like you could like call for money and it'll be there before your paycheck does, or also like an installment plan type thing is what I've known of it as well.
So this app called Klarna allows you to get your food from DoorDash, which, again, I don't know how many of you use that, but DoorDash is you call a guy up. And by the way, my son, the number of people my son says DoorDash from places that are within walking distance of their home. Ed, for real. He says it's stunning, Dad, the number of people that call me to deliver their food from a place that's a block.
It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it, and I was forced to use it when my son was born during COVID. Like we weren't allowed to leave like the hospital and things like that. So that was the only time I was ever forced to use like Grubhub, DoorDash. And you're right, like seeing the stuff coming through, like a cup of coffee thing, a donut. I saw a single, unbelievable.
Yeah, but they are now giving cash advances for people to buy their food in advance and pay for it in installments. Is this? I mean. Again, who am I to judge? I don't know what that's. Is that a good development? Is that a canary in the coal mine development for our economy? We're borrowing money to buy food on DoorDash and then pay it off in installments? I don't know what to make of that. I'll get back to you on it once I process it. Really weird. You guys that listen in Illinois, if you don't know this, you should know. I think most of you understand that your state is run by a communist who thinks he's going to be the next president, I'm told. Big boy, Pritzker, the Shoney's big boy. And his sister, I think, that dresses up like a woman, looks exactly like him as a woman. And like it's a Tootsie episode or something. Pritzker, those people are straight up. The Democrats in Illinois are maybe some of the worst. You know, we talk a lot about New York and L.A., but not to be outdone or forgotten, the Democrats in the state of Illinois. Here to talk about Ed and some other issues, great writing and news reporting at readlion.com. The Lion is the website, readlion.com. Josh Mann is the managing editor there and joins us again. Josh, great to have you back.
Thanks so much. It's my pleasure.
And by the way, in full disclosure, I do some work with not only the Lion, but the parent organization behind the Lion, the Herzog Foundation, and they've had a big win in court that I wanted to address with you, Josh, and I know you've written about that too, so we've got a lot to unpack here. But let's start with Illinois and what they're up to. My sister-in-law is a homeschool mom. I have two nephews who are homeschooled in Illinois, in Cook County, as a matter of fact. And she notified me late last week about this. I didn't hear anything about it. It kind of crept through the Illinois legislature. What's going on there exactly?
Yeah, so this is, just a little bill called the Homeschool Act. What could be wrong with that? But Democrats in Illinois have introduced this legislation that is advancing and will be coming up for a vote. It's scheduled for a vote on the House floor. And what it does and why it is worrying homeschool families and homeschool advocates is because it requires homeschooling families to report the credentials of the teachers of the homeschool, for example, to the local public school. And then perhaps the most chilling thing that's written in here is that truancy laws or laws around making sure that kids are in school will be enforced by ad hoc courts put together by basically local school districts. And so a parent could theoretically be dragged before this court and accused of not properly educating their child. And so some of the reporting requirements would include parents having to be able to show what their kids have been learning. People can question it, people can sort of turn them in. And so it seems to be what critics on the homeschool side say is these are really lawmakers who are trying to crack down and slow down the homeschool movement and sort of this alternative public education movement.
And Josh, this is what people should understand. While we celebrate yesterday, and I'll ask you a little bit about what Trump did with executive orders, I know it still has to go through Congress. You know, if you should be successful in getting rid of the Department of Education and indeed sending education back to the states, the fight is not over for educational choice and educational freedom, and Illinois proves that, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And so what residents need to do is be involved, and they need to know what's happening at the state level, but also the local level. And so there were huge protests. There were hundreds gathered at the Illinois Capitol to protest the advancement of this bill, which just advanced out of committee. And so the problem there, of course, is that the Democrats have quite a bit of power. And so we'll see whether they can slow this down. And we'll find out very soon, actually.
I tell you something, this is House Bill 2827 in Illinois. It's called the Homeschool Act. House Bill 2827. This is pit of hell stuff when a legislature can force parents to show their credentials, show your papers, basically, to educate your own child, Josh. That's not a place we want to go.
Not at all. And in fact, Illinois in this move is moving the opposite direction as a lot of other states. There are other states who are actually lowering or taking away regulations for homeschool families. Now, I'm on the Missouri side, and I happen to be a homeschool dad. We're a great state for homeschool freedom. There's an organization, HSLDA, which often is on the legal front line of these kinds of battles. And so I would commend their website to the audience to look at what's going on in various states for those listeners who may be outside of Illinois. But certainly this kind of draconian lawmaking is a concern, and it seems anti-liberty. It really seems anti-American to me.
Josh Mann, managing editor at a publication you should read called The Lion, and I really do bookmark this site because they do great work. It's constant. It's every day they're updating important stories like this that I bet you don't read virtually anywhere else. I mean, I haven't seen, Josh, am I wrong? Other than readlion.com, I don't see a lot of reporting on this House bill at all in Illinois.
That's right. I mean, it's going to be more of your homeschool types or your education people that are kind of more in education policy, and so it's probably not
because John, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is what I want. The reason I'm spending so much time on this, I understand either there are a lot of us in this audience who say, well, my kids are up and out, I don't care, or well, my kids are in public school, I don't care, or well, my kids are in Christian school or private school, I don't care. Why should people care about this, Josh?
Well, it's the next generation. We're educating the next generation, and right now in America, most parents actually want more choices. In fact, we may talk about the president's executive order about the Department of Education. Even the president, the White House, is arguing that we need to do better. We're spending a lot of money and not having the results to show for it. And so when we think about what kind of country we want for the next generation, we have to think about how we're educating the next generation. And there's a ton of great things happening in education today, and there's some great movements, including the homeschool movement, private schools, but also the competition these are creating for public schools to make public schools better. And so we think really everybody benefits when we see this kind of growth. So when bills like this try to clamp down, it's not just what's going to happen in Illinois for some students. It's more the spirit of the thing. It's clamping down on improving educational outcomes for the next generation who will, be in charge soon enough.
By the way, let's be clear. If you took, a handful of homeschooled 18-year-olds and a handful of public schooled 18-year-olds and tested each group, I think we all understand who'd come out on top in test scores. Let's just be frank. Right?
Yeah. In fact, the data suggests that homeschool outcomes are extremely good relative to the general population. Civics engagement off the charts, generosity. There's a whole lot of factors there that get considered. And so certainly homeschooling has a lot going for it.
It's an outrageous thing. I wanted everybody to know about it. Again, it's in Illinois, and it's House Bill 2827. And if you live in Illinois, you better ring your representative and your senator's bell about it. You guys at the Herzog Foundation, that's the parent organization over your publication at The Lion, readlion.com. won a really important lawsuit during the Biden administration. I was talking during the show earlier about the weaponization of government against so many of us. Elon and Trump are trying to deregulate. When Democrats control government, they often like to weaponize it against its citizens, including the foundation that you work with.
That's right. And so here's what happened is in 2022, there was a law passed. It was called the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act. And what this did was add some protections for pregnant workers from workplace discrimination. Fair enough, right? But one of the lines in that bill said that employers should provide reasonable accommodations for known limitations related to pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions. Now, this is important. This isn't just in the weeds for the audience to understand. What happens is when a law is passed, there's a lot of language that then some federal agency has to interpret in order to enforce. And what happened was the EEOC, this is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. These are the guys who enforce employment law. They're a federal agency. They interpreted related medical conditions to include having or not choosing to have an abortion. And so what happens when laws are passed, our federal agencies interpret those according to the whims, usually of that presidential administration. Joe Biden signed this into law. His agency did the rulemaking process on this and released that last April. What it effectively meant was employers now are required to provide accommodations for an employee who wants to get an abortion. Obviously, religious employers like the Herzog Foundation take exception to that. And we believe that our First Amendment right would be infringed if we were forced to do that because we have a religious objection to abortion. And a ton of other Christian organizations have the same objection. So a motion was filed last October, and happily on Tuesday, a judge issued a preliminary injunction essentially saying to the EEOC, you can't enforce that. Herzog Foundation does not have to follow that rule, but the case does still have to, we're still awaiting a final judgment, but this bodes in our favor, we believe.
Josh, that's a huge development, and kudos to the Herzog Foundation for standing up and fighting back. Also at readline.com, and I know you will talk more and write more about this there, but just briefly, if you could, President Trump's move yesterday, how do you guys read that at readline.com?
Well, I don't think it's a surprise. He talked about it on the campaign trail. He's been talking about it since the inauguration. He signs an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education. Here was his argument. He says, we're spending more, we're getting less. We're not really competing with other countries in the world, so we need to give education back to the states. I think the outstanding question is, legally, how much power does the executive branch have? How much can they dismantle it? Can they abolish it? What congressional action is needed? But I think the president's point is to set the agenda and to say, look, we've got to do better here. But the two other important things quickly. One is he fully preserves Pell Grants, Title I funding, and resources for special needs kids. And he also praised teachers in his address. And so I thought it was actually a pretty fair and balanced keeping of a promise, of a campaign promise. And he's not just out to destroy education. So if somebody says that, don't believe him.
Josh Mann is at readlion.com. Cultural stuff and issues you will not get anywhere else. This is the website to go. Thanks for your time, Josh. We'll talk to you again real soon. This says it all. Remember a little while ago, if you weren't listening, I was talking about this new, well, it's not a new app. It's been around for a bit. Klarna. Klarna is apparently an app that loans people money, gives them an advance, like a small advance for purchases and stuff, and then you pay them back, I assume, with interest. I can't imagine why the people just be handing out free money. So I assume there's some sort of money making in it. So interest loans of some kind. And what people are doing are buying food with they're using DoorDash to buy food that they've borrowed from this app called Klarna. Somebody just said on X, the reason the Department of Education is being eliminated is that it has ruled our schools for 50 years, and we end up with people dumb enough to sign up for amortized Panda Express payments. Is that not genius? That's exactly right. I mean, I can't even get my mind wrapped around a place where people are borrowing money to order from a restaurant to have it delivered to their home. Ed, can you get there? I'm still trying to process it. It blows my mind.
No, and unless you're going hungry, unless you really need something to eat, no, this makes no sense. I don't know why.
And if you're in that state, are you ordering out?
Of course not. No.
Should you be? Yeah. Dave Ramsey, one of Dave Ramsey's biggest admonishments, if you're in the hole with debt, stop eating out. Stop going to restaurants. Stop it. That's the biggest money suck there is. Now people are getting on this Klarna app and borrowing money to order Wendy's and pay it in installments. Holy crap. I don't know. By the way, our friend John Nolte at Breitbart was responding to somebody, Bill Burr, going on The View and disappointing us all. I played that clip for you earlier. And he was responding to somebody that said Bill Burr has fully morphed into the type of person he built his career mocking. And John Nolte responded by saying, this is a disease called David Lettermaning. Sad, but true. Also true. Sad thing when really, really smart, great, solid comics end up going off the rails. Let me go through some good news headlines before we get out of here on Friday, in no particular order. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has announced she's actually going to charge 3 alleged Tesla arsonists. For those of us wondering when she was going to move on somebody and something domestically, Pam Bondi announcing federal charges yesterday for 3 defendants responsible for the recent arson attacks. They need to lock those people away for a long time. That's good. Greenpeace. Here's another piece of good news. Greenpeace is forced to pay $650 million. A judge awarding this week in damages to the developer of a Dakota Access Pipeline after finding Greenpeace is liable for helping incite mass demonstrations aimed at derailing the energy product. 9 Morton County jurors found Greenpeace entities guilty of defamation, trespass, and conspiracy related to their role in funding and training activists seek to block a segment of 1,700-mile oil pipeline. The Dallas-based company Energy Transfer and its subsidiary Dakota Access initially sought $300 million. Greenpeace said they couldn't afford that. They'd have to shut down, and a jury just gave them $700 million instead. Couldn't happen to nicer people. This is what we need, folks. This is what you need. This is what judges ought to be doing, is clamping down on people destroying pipelines and burning and destroying car companies and cars and people's property. This is the kind of stuff judges are good for, not getting in the way of transporting illegal drug gangs to Venezuela. That's bad judicial temperament. Cori Bush, if you remember her, lunatic, former congresswoman out of St. Louis. Cori Bush's husband indicted for wire fraud because, what'd he do? Brilliant, of course. COVID relief funds. Cori Bush, while she was a sitting member of Congress, her husband ended up kiting $150,000 in COVID money falsely and was found guilty of it. And again, you wonder why Democrats are so hungry to keep the government money flowing through all these entities. How many members of Congress and their families are siphoning off the top? How many do you suppose? Probably more than we care to admit or want to know. New York City's law allowing non-citizens to vote is dead as the state's highest court shuts it down. This is another rule for sanity. The New York Court of Appeals ruled 6-1. New York City Council cannot let illegals vote. And this, Maine. The state of Maine buckled. Remember when the governor went to the White House a couple of weeks ago and got all mouthy and said, yeah, well, I'll see you in court. And Trump said, bring it, lady. Well, she didn't bring it. She packed it up and went home. She quit. The U.S. Department of Agriculture announcing this week the University of Maine Systems, their college, has agreed to comply with Donald Trump's executive order to keep men out of women's sports. 8 public universities in Maine, subject to a temporary pause in funding from the USDA if they didn't comply. USDA said, okay, we'll take your money. Maine said, okay, uncle, never mind. It's amazing how people cave when you shut off their spigot of money. I hope you have a great weekend. I'm so glad you listened to the show. I'm so grateful you're here because I know there are a trillion places you could be. Lots of choices. I hope you'll check out the podcast. I hope you'll check out our newsletter. Go to chrisstigall.com for it all. Thank you for doubling our Food for the Poor donations. You are awesome.
Hey, President Trump is moving at lightning speed in his first weeks in office. Executive orders, new policies, promises kept, and it can be hard to keep up. Until now, if you subscribe to the Trump Report, it's a daily email and it brings you all the highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Get all the details on the administration's top actions that day with in-depth analysis. Stay up to date on what President Trump's doing each and every day to make America great again. And be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of it. The Trump Report. Get it today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump. That's SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump.
So that's a wrap for another Chris Stigall Show podcast. Thanks for committing to it, listening to it all the way through. You're a fighter. I like that about you. Hope you'll leave it a 5-star review and a written review. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We'll see you next time here on the Chris Stigall Show podcast.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.